Good morning, Oakwood. This is a crazy time in the history of our country and in the history of our world. And I've heard many people refer to this as being just an unprecedented pandemic. But as I've taken time over the last several weeks just to read church history, something that I enjoy to do, I've been reminded just on countless occasions that there is nothing new under the sun. And while this may be a different strain, a different particular virus, viruses and plagues are nothing new to the world. They're certainly nothing new to God, and the church has had to adapt to plagues for a number of years. One particular plague, the Black Plague, about 500 years ago, actually started in Asia, much like this one, and swept across the known world at the time, resulting in many deaths. And the church at the time, much like today, had to adapt. Pastors had to find new ways to minister to their congregation. And I was amazed that many of the pastors found comfort in books like the book of Job. I actually found one particular pastor, John Calvin, preached 159 sermons on the book of Job during that time. And during our devotion this morning, I just want to call your attention to that particular book. Now, I don't have time this morning to read through the entire book. I don't think I have that much time allotted to me in this short video. So I would encourage you to go back and look at that book later this week. Read it. You can read the entire book in about 2 hours. But I do just want to kind of summarize just the overall story of the book of Job for you. The first two chapters are filled with enormous loss. Loss of work, loss of friends, loss of family members. Job even suffers with his own physical health issues. And at the end of chapter 2, he was isolated, left feeling alone and abandoned. Maybe you can relate to that during this time. Then in chapter 3, Job begins to ask the question of why. Why is God allowing all of this? Why has he lost his family? Why has he lost his wealth? You can count on numerous occasions, starting in verse 11, where Job asks the question of why. Why would God allow something like this to happen? But in the book of Job, God never provides the answer to Job's question of why. In fact, in chapters 38 through 42, God just simply explains that he's God, and that's that. Job must learn to be satisfied with that answer. We learn from the opening chapters of Job that what prompted the suffering of Job is actually a conversation between God and Satan that God actually initiated. It's apparent that God wanted to teach Satan a lesson. And even as you fast forward through history to the time of Jesus' suffering on the cross, God is still teaching Satan a lesson. God was fighting and winning a battle of cosmic proportion. Sometimes our question of why God would allow a pandemic like the coronavirus to exist, or questions like why God would allow poverty or cancer or death, are beyond our comprehension. Sometimes we simply have to be satisfied with the answer that God is God and we are not. His ways are so much higher than our ways. See, the book of Job teaches us that the suffering and pain that we go through is often about something so much bigger than us. Sometimes God uses our suffering to bring about life in someone else. Or sometimes, like with Job, God uses our suffering to fight a cosmic battle. But in reading Job in light of the whole story of Scripture, we know that God uses situations like this both for his glory and for our good, and that all of this is part of his global plan of redemption. See, the message of the Bible is that God wins, and so do you. We may not always understand why God does what he does, but that's just part of him being God. So don't lose heart during this pandemic. Don't panic. This is all part of God's plan. So how do you see him at work right now? How do you see him at work in in the life of your family? How do you see him at work in the world? How do you see him at work in our own church? That's the question I want to leave you with.